Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to address the Human Rights Council on behalf of Montenegro within its second mandate as a member of the Council. I congratulate Ambassador Zniber on his election as President of the Council, confident that under his governance the Council will continue to fulfill its solemn mandate of protecting and promoting human rights around the world. This year we gather against the backdrop of an increased instability and prevalence of armed conflicts and violence worldwide, and amidst an ever-growing polarization and fractures in the international order. In the face of exponentially growing global crises and unfolding emergencies that seize the world's attention, from the existential threat of the climate crisis and the risk of uncontrolled artificial intelligence to increasing inequality and rising threats to democracy and stability, we meet at a poignant moment, the 10th anniversary of the start of Russia's war against Ukraine, marked by the annexation of Crimea and part of the Donbass, and 2 years since Russia launched its unjustified and unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As is increasingly documented, Russia continues to wage its war of aggression in gross violation of international humanitarian law and human rights law, trampling on the very principles of international law, including the United Nations Charter. We remain appalled by the magnitude of Russia's atrocities and hostilities against Ukraine and its population, which may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. The death toll and life-changing injuries in Ukraine are staggering. We reiterate our strong advocacy for ensuring holistic accountability for serious crimes committed in connection with the war of aggression against Ukraine. There must be no impunity. Victims' rights to truth, justice, and reparation must be ensured, as well as guarantees of non-recurrence. Montenegro remains firmly in solidarity with Ukraine and will continue to support it until the country's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity are fully restored. Excellencies, the horror unfolding in Ukraine is not a standalone example. The catastrophic humanitarian crisis evolving before our eyes in Gaza is appalling and demands to be addressed quickly, especially the plight of the 1.5 million civilians sheltered in Rafah. We deplore every innocent life lost, especially children and women. Montenegro has been clear since the beginning of the war sparked by Hamas. We condemned in the strongest terms the terrorist attacks by Hamas on Israel on October the 7th and called for the immediate release of the hostages still being held. While we also support Israel's right, we have made it clear from the beginning that any military response must be fully consistent with international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions to protect civilians to the greatest extent and minimize civilian harm. We voice our support for efforts to establish a humanitarian pause that would lead to a lasting ceasefire, the unconditional release of all hostages, and the rapid, safe, and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid and basic services to civilians. As is repeatedly said, both Israelis and Palestinians have an equal right to live in safety, dignity, and peace. The way forward must ensure a sustainable political solution based on the two-state model which underpins a viable Palestinian state and a secure Israel living side by side in peace, security, and mutual recognition. Excellencies, against the backdrop of these geopolitical developments, we need a concerted strategic course of action to reverse the alarming trend of systemic and widespread violations of human rights, growing discrimination and inequality, as well as the erosion of democratic institutions and civil space. To meet these new challenges, we must revive the spirit and vitality of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and implement the global promises made last year on the 75th anniversary of this groundbreaking document. We must ensure that human rights are at the heart of our responses to multiple crises and are supported by a legal system based on the rule of law, and that our shared commitment to upholding the rule of law, international humanitarian principles, universal human rights, and international law, including the UN Charter, is unconditionally respected and enforced. As the new agenda for peace calls for, we also need a more networked, inclusive, and effective multilateralism. Montenegro remains a staunch proponent of multilateralism, which is one of the key components of its foreign policy. It is in the very DNA of geographically small states to be committed to effective multilateralism and international cooperation grounded on rules-based international order. In that vein, I will use this opportunity to highlight that Montenegro presented candidature for non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for 2026-2027 within East European Group. The period of intended non-permanent membership to the United Nations Security Council coincides with the 20th anniversary of regaining its independence of Montenegro and membership to the United Nations. Excellencies, with the same vigor and enthusiasm, Montenegro will continue to be an honest and constructive actor in the Council and beyond, with the aim of strengthening respect for and protection of universal human rights everywhere and for all. And we will continue to cooperate with UN human rights mechanisms. Thank you.